Have you ever left a conversation feeling strangely drained, even though the other person never raised their voice, never insulted you, and even seemed warm, thoughtful, maybe even complimentary? You replay the exchange in your head and can't point to a single harsh word, yet something inside you feels unsettled, smaller, slightly unsure of itself. That reaction is not weakness, and it is not imagination. Sometimes it is your intuition recognizing a subtle pattern your mind has not yet named. Not all harm arrives loudly. Some of it arrives dressed as concern, wrapped in politeness, delivered with a calm tone and a reassuring smile. This is not about labeling people as villains or turning every uncomfortable interaction into a dramatic story about evil. Stoicism does not encourage paranoia, and it certainly does not encourage bitterness. Instead, it asks for clarity. It asks you to observe carefully without emotional exaggeration and to understand the dynamics at play so you can protect your peace without losing your composure. There are people whose behavior consistently leaves you doubting yourself, shrinking your ambitions, or feeling emotionally obligated in ways you cannot fully explain. They may not consciously see themselves as malicious, but their patterns erode your confidence, drain your energy, or subtly redirect your choices. In this video, we will look at 5 types of quietly harmful dynamics, not to condemn anyone, but to recognize them, because recognition is power. When you can name a pattern, you are no longer controlled by it. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that the greatest freedom is not found in controlling others, but in mastering his own response. The same principle applies here. You cannot prevent every manipulative remark, every guilt-inducing comment, or every subtle attempt to keep you small. But you can decide what enters your mind, what shapes your self-image, and what influences your direction. The goal is not to become suspicious of everyone around you. The goal is to become steady. When you understand how certain behaviors operate, you stop personalizing them. You stop absorbing them. You observe them the way a Stoic observes a storm, present, aware, but not internally shaken. As we move through these 5 types, pay attention not only to others, but to your own reactions. Notice when you feel slightly diminished after an interaction. Notice when your clarity fades. Those signals matter, and by the end, you will not only recognize these patterns more easily, you will know how to respond in a way that preserves your dignity, your boundaries, and your inner calm. The first pattern is the friendly manipulator, the person who never appears aggressive, never criticizes you outright, and often positions themselves as supportive, insightful, even protective of your best interests. They compliment you publicly, affirm your strengths, and speak in a tone that feels constructive rather than confrontational. Yet after repeated interactions, you notice a quiet shift inside yourself. You begin second-guessing your decisions. You start wondering whether you are as capable as you thought. Their feedback always contains a subtle adjustment, a small correction that places them slightly above you. It might sound like, "You're incredibly talented, you just need a bit more structure," or "You have great ideas," but sometimes you can come across as inexperienced. On the surface, it appears helpful. Underneath it plants doubt. The power of this dynamic lies in its ambiguity. Because nothing they say is overtly hostile, you struggle to identify what feels wrong. They frame themselves as the mentor, the steady voice of reason, the one who understands you best. Over time, you may begin seeking their approval without realizing it. You start filtering your choices through how they might evaluate you. That is the quiet shift from independence to subtle dependence. In professional settings, this can look like praise in meetings paired with quiet reservations shared behind closed doors. In personal relationships, it can appear as constant concern about your decisions that slowly narrows your confidence. The danger is not in a single comment, but in the cumulative effect of small suggestions that erode your self-trust. Stoicism does not advise you to confront this person with anger or to label them as an enemy. Instead, it teaches awareness. Observe the pattern without emotional reaction. Ask yourself a simple question after speaking with this person. Do I feel clearer or more confused about my own judgment? Epictetus emphasized that while you cannot control what others say, you can decide whether to internalize it. When you recognize the friendly manipulator, the key is to detach your identity from their evaluations. Listen if there is useful information, but do not hand them authority over your worth. You do not need to argue. You do not need to expose them. You simply stop granting them influence over how you see yourself. Once you anchor your confidence internally, their subtle suggestions lose power. They may continue speaking the same way, but their words no longer enter deeply. And that is where Stoic strength begins. Not in defeating them, but in refusing to let their quiet influence redefine you. The second pattern is the conditional supporter, the person who appears deeply caring, attentive, and emotionally available, especially when you are struggling. They show up when you are uncertain, discouraged, or vulnerable. They listen carefully, offer comfort, and create the impression that they are your safest ally. In those moments, their presence feels reassuring. But something changes when you begin to regain strength. When you set clearer goals, establish boundaries, or grow more confident, their energy subtly shifts. The warmth cools, the encouragement becomes quieter. You might hear comments like, "You've changed a lot lately," or "I miss the old version of you." On the surface, it sounds nostalgic. Beneath it, there is discomfort. This person does not necessarily want you to fail. They simply prefer you in a state where you need them. Your vulnerability reinforces their importance. Your growth threatens it. That is why their support often intensifies when you are at your lowest and weakens when you stand tall. They may respond to your progress with subtle sarcasm, teasing remarks that touch your former insecurities, or quiet withdrawal meant to signal disappointment. The message is rarely explicit. It is emotional. You begin to feel guilty for evolving. You question whether your growth is somehow disloyal. Stoicism teaches that growth is not betrayal. It is nature. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that change is the essence of life. To resist someone else's growth is to resist reality itself. When you encounter the conditional supporter, the key is not confrontation fueled by hurt, but clarity. Notice whether their encouragement expands as you expand or contracts when you rise. A genuine ally celebrates your strength because it does not diminish their own. A conditional supporter measures their value by how much you rely on them. The Stoic response is simple: continue growing without apology. You do not need to justify your evolution. You do not owe anyone the weaker version of yourself for the sake of their comfort. Maintain kindness but remove emotional dependence. If their support fades when your confidence rises, let it fade. Your responsibility is not to remain small so someone else can feel significant. Your responsibility is to remain aligned with your own development. And when you choose growth over guilt, you step further into inner freedom. The third pattern is the guilt-based controller, the person who rarely issues direct commands, but gradually shapes your decisions through emotion. They do not shout, threaten, or forbid. Instead, they worry. They express concern. They frame their preferences as protection. "I just don't feel comfortable when you spend time with them." "Are you sure that's a good idea?" "I only want what's best for you." Each sentence sounds reasonable in isolation. The danger lies in repetition. Over time, you begin adjusting your behavior not because you believe it is wrong, but because you want to prevent their disappointment. Your choices become filtered through how they might react. You hesitate before acting independently. You start asking for reassurance before making simple decisions. That is how control operates quietly. It shrinks your world without ever declaring authority over it. Emotional controllers often present themselves as deeply invested in your well-being. They position their discomfort as evidence of love. When you assert independence, they grow distant, saddened, or subtly wounded. The message is indirect but powerful. Your autonomy causes them pain. As a result, you begin negotiating with yourself. You sacrifice small freedoms to maintain harmony. You avoid certain people, abandon certain goals, or silence certain opinions to keep the emotional climate stable. The Stoics were clear about this dynamic. You are responsible for your choices, not for managing the emotional reactions of others. When you base your life decisions on preserving someone else's mood, you surrender your internal authority. Marcus Aurelius wrote that true freedom is not external permission but internal discipline. The Stoic response to the guilt-based controller is calm clarity. You acknowledge their concern without allowing it to dictate your path. I understand you feel that way, but this decision is mine. You do not escalate. You do not argue. You do not apologize for autonomy. You simply stand firm. Boundaries do not require hostility. They require steadiness. The moment you stop negotiating your independence for emotional approval, the control weakens. They may resist at first. They may attempt to intensify the guilt. But if you remain composed and consistent, the dynamic shifts. You demonstrate that love does not require confinement and that care does not justify control. In doing so, you preserve both your dignity and your peace. The fourth pattern is the subtle saboteur, the person who never openly opposes you but rarely supports you with genuine enthusiasm either. They stand close enough to appear loyal, yet every time you take a step towards something bigger, they introduce hesitation. Their words are rarely harsh. In fact, they often sound practical, grounded, even responsible. You share an idea about starting a new project and they respond, "That's ambitious. Just be careful. Most ventures like that fail." You mention learning a new skill and they say, "At this stage, is it really worth the effort?" They do not forbid you. They do not mock you outright. They simply layer your excitement with doubt. The effect is cumulative. After enough of these exchanges, your enthusiasm dims. You begin preemptively anticipating their skepticism. You find yourself justifying your goals before you even pursue them. The saboteur often frames their caution as realism. They claim they are protecting you from disappointment, but realism that consistently weakens your confidence is not neutral. It is corrosive. True support acknowledges risks without extinguishing initiative. The subtle saboteur, however, rarely celebrates possibility. They focus on limitations, timing, and potential failure. Stoicism does not ask you to ignore risks. It asks you to assess them clearly and act according to your values. When someone repeatedly injects hesitation into your decisions, the Stoic response is not confrontation fueled by resentment. It is discernment. Ask yourself whether their input sharpens your judgment or shrinks your courage. If every conversation leaves you less certain about your own path, you may need to reduce how much access they have to your aspirations. Not out of spite, but out of protection. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that approval from others is unnecessary when your actions align with reason and virtue. You do not need external validation to pursue what feels right, nor do you need to debate every cautious remark. Sometimes, strength is simply choosing not to share your most important plans with those who consistently dampen your resolve. You can maintain civility. You can remain respectful, but you can also guard your ambitions carefully. When you stop seeking encouragement from someone who quietly doubts you, their influence fades. The Stoic does not waste energy trying to change a saboteur's mindset. Instead, they cultivate inner certainty strong enough that outside skepticism no longer dictates their direction. The fifth pattern is the energy drainer, the person who does not attack you, control you, or openly undermine you, but consistently leaves you depleted. Their presence is heavy. Every conversation circles back to their disappointments, their grievances, their ongoing struggles. At first, your instinct is compassion. You listen. You offer encouragement. You try to be supportive. But over time, you notice a pattern. The same stories repeat. The same complaints return. Solutions are dismissed. Responsibility is avoided. The focus remains fixed on injustice and personal suffering. You begin to feel responsible for stabilizing their emotions. When their name appears on your phone, you hesitate. After speaking with them, you sit in silence, drained rather than connected. This dynamic is subtle because it does not look like hostility. It looks like need. The energy drainer often reinforces your importance by saying, "You're the only one who understands," or "I don't know what I'd do without you." Those words create obligation. You stay because you do not want to seem uncaring. Yet genuine compassion does not require self-erasure. Stoicism emphasizes the importance of maintaining inner equilibrium. You cannot serve others effectively if your own stability is compromised. Epictetus taught that we must distinguish between what is within our control and what is not. You can offer support. You cannot live someone else's emotional life for them. When a person clings to suffering as identity, your endless reassurance will not resolve it. The Stoic response is measured distance, not cold abandonment. You set limits on how much time and emotional bandwidth you give. You might say, "I care about you, but I need space today," or redirect conversations toward constructive steps rather than repeated lament. This is not selfishness, it is self-regulation. If you allow yourself to be chronically drained, resentment eventually replaces empathy. By preserving your energy, you protect both your well-being and the possibility of healthier interaction. The energy drainer may resist boundaries at first. They may interpret distance as rejection, but if you remain calm and consistent, the dynamic either adjusts or naturally weakens. The Stoic understands that peace of mind is not a luxury. It is a foundation. You cannot illuminate someone else's darkness if your own light is extinguished. Guarding your energy is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of wisdom. Now that you can recognize these 5 patterns, the friendly manipulator, the conditional supporter, the guilt-based controller, the subtle saboteur, and the energy drainer, the question becomes practical. What do you do? Stoicism does not encourage dramatic exits, public confrontations, or emotional retaliation. It teaches disciplined response. The first step is awareness. Notice the shift inside you after certain interactions. Do you feel smaller, more doubtful, more responsible for someone else's mood? That internal signal is data. The second step is naming the dynamic without exaggeration. You do not need to label someone as evil. You only need to recognize the pattern. The third step is narrowing your focus to what you control. You cannot rewrite another person's tendencies. You can adjust your access, your boundaries, and your emotional investment. With manipulators, detach your identity from their evaluations. With conditional supporters, continue growing without apology. With controllers, communicate decisions calmly and refuse guilt as leverage. With subtle saboteurs, protect your ambitions by sharing selectively. With energy drainers, practice compassion with limits. The final step is consistency. Boundaries lose strength when they fluctuate. A Stoic response is steady, not reactive. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that no one can disturb your mind without your consent. That is not denial of pain. It is a reminder of sovereignty. When you respond intentionally rather than emotionally, you reclaim authority over your inner world. You do not need to change these people. You only need to prevent their patterns from shaping your self-concept and direction. Inner mastery is not achieved by removing all difficult personalities from your life. It is achieved by refusing to let them dictate your peace. When you remain calm, observant, and aligned with your values, you transform each encounter into practice. And practice builds strength. In the end, these patterns are not invitations to fear people. They are invitations to strengthen yourself. Difficult personalities will always exist. Subtle manipulation, quiet guilt, disguised doubt, and emotional dependence are not new phenomena. What determines your freedom is not their presence, but your response. Stoicism teaches that the only territory you truly govern is your own mind. When you stop personalizing every comment, when you stop negotiating your growth for someone else's comfort, when you stop absorbing emotional burdens that are not yours to carry, something shifts. You become steady. You begin to move through conversations with clarity rather than confusion. You listen without surrendering your judgment. You care without abandoning your boundaries. You support without sacrificing your energy. That is strength. The goal is not to defeat anyone or expose hidden intentions. The goal is self-mastery. Toxic dynamics lose power the moment you stop feeding them with doubt, guilt, or reactivity. When you choose calm over confrontation, distance over drama, and clarity over confusion, you protect your inner peace in the most powerful way possible. Marcus Aurelius understood that life will always present challenging people, but it is your discipline that determines whether they disturb your balance. So do not waste energy trying to reform every difficult person you meet. Instead, refine yourself. Refine your awareness. Refine your boundaries. Refine your responses. Because the greatest victory is not removing darkness from the world, it is refusing to let it take root within you.